Picture a grand ivy-clad manor in the misty hills of Devonshire, where a glittering engagement party hides a web of secrets. In just 30 seconds, a scream shatters the night. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the host, lies dead, a letter opener in his heart. Who among the elegant guests, his devoted niece, her ambitious fiancé, a debt-ridden cousin, or a nervous solicitor, wields the hand of murder? Why was his brandy untouched, a cigarette case misplaced, and a letter to his niece left unfinished? Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective, whose little grey cells unravel a tapestry of lies, red herrings, and betrayal. Will you guess the killer before the shocking truth unfolds? Dive into a classic Agatha Christie mystery, where every clue counts and no one is what they seem. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackthorn Manor. In the waning days of an unusually warm October, the rolling hills of Devonshire cradled Blackthorn Manor, a grand but faded relic of Georgian opulence. The estate, with its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys, stood at the edge of a sleepy village, its windows glinting like watchful eyes under the autumn sun. The manor belonged to Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a retired diplomat whose reputation for hosting lavish gatherings had not dimmed with age. Tonight, the house buzzed with anticipation, for Sir Reginald had invited a select group to celebrate the engagement of his niece, Miss Eleanor Ashbourne, to Mr. Victor Langston, a rising financier from London. The drawing room, resplendent with crystal chandeliers and polished mahogany, hummed with polite conversation. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend of Hercule Poirot, stood near the fireplace, a glass of sherry in hand, observing the guests with a soldier's instinct for detail. Hastings had been invited at the insistence of Eleanor, whom he had met during a brief sojourn in London. Her charm and vivacity had won him over, and though he was no stranger to society gatherings, the undercurrent of tension in the room piqued his curiosity. Sir Reginald, a portly man with a florid complexion and a penchant for dramatic gestures, held court at the center of the room. His booming voice recounted tales of his diplomatic triumphs in Constantinople, though his audience, a mix of family, friends, and local gentry, seemed more polite than enthralled. Beside him stood Eleanor, radiant in a gown of emerald silk, her auburn hair catching the candlelight. Victor Langston, her fiancé, hovered nearby, his sharp features and tailored suit marking him as a man of ambition. Hastings noted the way Victor's eyes darted about, as if cataloguing the room's wealth and influence. Across the room, Lady Margaret Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's sister-in-law, sat stiffly in an armchair, her lips pursed in disapproval. Her son, Charles Ashbourne, a lanky young man with a sullen air, leaned against a bookcase, nursing a cigarette. Charles had recently returned. Gambling debts and reckless behavior had followed him. Beside him stood Dr. Evelyn Marwood, the village physician, whose quiet demeanor and keen eyes suggested a mind accustomed to observation. Her presence at the gathering was unusual, for she was not of the Ashbourne social circle, but Sir Reginald had insisted on her inclusion, citing her steadying influence. At a card table in the corner, Mrs. Clara Wentworth, a widowed cousin of Sir Reginald, played bridge with Mr. Harold Grayson, a solicitor from Exeter. Mrs. Wentworth's laughter was bright but brittle, and Hastings caught the fleeting glances she cast towards Victor Langston. Grayson, meanwhile, seemed distracted, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Rounding out the party was Miss Beatrice Langley, a childhood friend of Eleanor's, whose sharp wit and penchant for gossip made her both charming and dangerous. As the clock struck 8, a butler announced dinner, and the guests filed into the dining room, where a long table gleamed with silver and crystal. Hastings took a seat, noting the careful arrangement. Sir Reginald at the head, Eleanor and Victor to his right, Lady Margaret to his left, and the others interspersed with calculated precision. The meal began with consommé, followed by roasted pheasant, but the conversation felt stilted, as if each guest guarded a secret. "Eleanor, my dear," Sir Reginald said, raising his glass, "to your happiness and to Victor, who has won your heart. May Blackthorn Manor always be a haven for you both." The toast was met with murmurs of agreement, but Hastings caught the flicker of unease in Eleanor's smile. Victor's response was polished but lacked warmth, and Lady Margaret's glass remained untouched. Charles, seated across from Hastings, muttered something inaudible, his eyes fixed on his plate. The evening progressed, but the atmosphere grew heavier. Mrs. Wentworth's laughter grew sharper, and Grayson's nervous tapping became more pronounced. Dr. Marwood, ever observant, spoke little but watched much, a gaze lingering on Sir Reginald as he launched into another anecdote. Beatrice Langley, meanwhile, peppered the table with sly remarks, each one landing like a pebble in a still pond. As dessert was served, a delicate lemon soufflé, Sir Reginald rose, his face flushed from wine. "My friends," he began, "tonight is not only a celebration of love, but also of legacy. Tomorrow I shall make an announcement that will secure the future of Blackthorn Manor and its place in our family's history." The words hung in the air, met with curious glances and strained smiles. Hastings felt a prickle of unease, though he could not pinpoint its source. The meal concluded, and the guests retired to the drawing-room for coffee and liqueur. A piercing scream shattered the calm. It came from the direction of the study. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock and suspicion. Dr. Marwood was the first to move, her medical bag already in hand, followed closely by Hastings and Victor. They raced down the corridor, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The study door stood ajar, and inside, Sir Reginald lay slumped over his desk, a letter opener protruding from his chest. Blood pooled on the blotting paper, staining a half-written letter. Dr. Marwood knelt beside him, her fingers searching for a pulse, but her expression confirmed what Hastings already knew. Sir Reginald Ashbourne was dead. The room erupted in chaos. Eleanor clutched Victor's arm, her face pale. Lady Margaret stood rigid, her eyes wide with horror. Charles swore under his breath, while Mrs. Wentworth let out a choked sob. Grayson, oddly composed, muttered about calling the police. Beatrice, for once, was silent, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. Hastings stepped back, his mind racing. The study was a fortress of oak and leather, its windows locked, its only entrance the door through which they had entered. A silver cigarette case lay open on the desk, a single cigarette missing. A glass of brandy sat untouched, its surface shimmering in the lamplight. A clock on the mantel ticked loudly, marking the time at 10:17 p.m. "Who could have done this?" Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. Hastings had no answer, but he knew one man who might. Hercule Poirot, the fastidious Belgian detective, was in London, a mere train ride away. Hastings had seen Poirot unravel mysteries with nothing but his little grey cells, and this crime, brutal, calculated and cloaked in the elegance of Blackthorn Manor, demanded his genius. As the guests retreated to the drawing-room, their faces etched with fear and suspicion, Hastings slipped away to the telephone. He dialed Poirot's number, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "Mon ami," Poirot's voice crackled through the line. "What is this urgency that disturbs my evening?" "A murder, Poirot," Hastings replied. "At Blackthorn Manor. Sir Reginald Ashbourne is dead, and I fear the truth is buried beneath a web of lies." There was a pause. Then Poirot's voice, calm and precise. "Very well, Hastings. I shall take the first train tomorrow. Observe everything, mon ami, but disturb nothing. The little grey cells. They will have much work to do. As Hastings hung up, he glanced back at the drawing room, where the suspects gathered like players in a deadly game. The night was young, but the shadows of Blackthorn Manor had grown dark indeed. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. Clusters, their faces pale under the flickering chandelier, each avoiding the other's eyes. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the doorway, his soldier's instincts urging him to catalogue every detail, every glance, every tremor of a hand. The police had been summoned, but the nearest station was miles away, and the night promised to stretch long before their arrival. Eleanor Ashbourne sat on a velvet settee, her emerald gown now seeming garish against her ashen complexion. Victor Langston stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, though Hastings noted the stiffness in his posture, as if he were playing a role rather than feeling it. Lady Margaret Ashbourne, rigid as ever, occupied her armchair like a throne, her lips pressed into a thin line. Charles Ashbourne paced near the fireplace, his cigarette case clutched tightly, the same silver case Hastings had glimpsed in the study. Dr. Evelyn Marwood, calm but alert, sat near the window, her medical bag at her feet, her eyes scanning the room with clinical precision. Mrs. Clara Wentworth dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though her tears seemed more performative than genuine. Mr. Harold Grayson, the solicitor, stood apart, his fingers still tapping nervously, while Miss Beatrice Langley perched on the edge of a chair, her usual wit replaced by a watchful silence. The clock on the mantel struck 11, each chime a hammer blow in the tense silence. Hastings glanced at the study door, now guarded by the butler, Mr. Reynolds, a stoic man whose lined face betrayed no emotion. The letter opener, the blood, the untouched brandy glass, these images burned in Hastings's mind. He knew Poirot would demand precision, and so he began to piece together the evening's timeline. Dinner had ended at 9:30, and Sir Reginald had retired to his study shortly after. The scream, Mrs. Wentworth's, Hastings recalled, had come at 10:17, according to the study clock. In that 47-minute window, someone had entered the study, plunged the letter opener into Sir Reginald's chest, and left without being seen. The locked windows and single entrance suggested an intimate crime, committed by someone within the manor's walls. The sound of footsteps broke Hastings's reverie. Inspector Warren, a burly man with a bristling mustache, arrived with a constable in tow. His presence brought a ripple of relief, but also unease, as his gruff manner suggested more bluster than brilliance. "Right then," Warren announced, his voice echoing. "Nobody leaves this house until we've got statements. Captain Hastings, you found the body?" "With Dr. Marwood and Mr. Langston," Hastings clarified. "We heard the scream and ran to the study. Sir Reginald was already dead." Warren nodded, scribbling in a notebook. "And you, Doctor, anything to add?" Dr. Marwood's voice was steady, with force, suggesting intent. "I estimate the time of death between 10 and 10:15. Hastings noted the precision of her estimate, wondering if her calm was professional detachment or something more calculated. Warren turned to the group. "Who saw Sir Reginald last?" Eleanor's voice trembled. "I did. He kissed me goodnight after dinner and said he had papers to review. That was just before 9:30. "Anyone else?" Warren pressed. Silence. Then Charles spoke, his tone sullen. "I passed the study around 10. The door was closed, but I heard him humming. He was alive then." Warren's eyes narrowed. "And you didn't go in?" "No," Charles snapped. "I had no reason to." Hastings caught the edge in Charles's voice, the way his fingers tightened around the cigarette case. A lie, perhaps? Or merely nerves? He made a mental note for Poirot. The inspector began questioning each guest, their alibis a patchwork of vague recollections. Victor claimed to have been with Eleanor in the drawing room, discussing wedding plans. Lady Margaret said she had retired to her room to read, but had seen no one. Mrs. Wentworth insisted she had been playing cards with Grayson until the scream, though Grayson hesitated before confirming her story. Beatrice admitted to wandering the corridor, stretching her legs, but offered no witnesses. Dr. Marwood had been in the library, reviewing a medical journal alone. As Warren scribbled, Hastings observed the group. The Manor's isolation, no telephone lines beyond the one in the hall, no neighbors within shouting distance, meant the killer was likely among them. The thought sent a chill through him. He recalled Sir Reginald's announcement about securing Blackthorn Manor's future. Had it provoked someone? A will, perhaps? A change in inheritance? The inspector dismissed the guests to their rooms, with orders to remain in the manor. Hastings lingered, watching as Warren and the constable examined the study. The letter opener, now bagged as evidence, was an ornate piece, its handle engraved with the Ashbourne crest. The cigarette case, still open, revealed a faint smudge on its edge. Lipstick, perhaps? The brandy glass remained untouched, its contents undisturbed. Hastings noted the position of the desk, angled toward the door, as if Sir Reginald had been facing his killer. As he returned to the drawing room, Eleanor approached him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Captain Hastings, you know that detective, don't you? The Belgian one?" "Poirot," Hastings said. "He's coming tomorrow." "Thank God," she whispered. This is a nightmare. Uncle Reginald was kind, generous. Who would do this?" Hastings patted her hand, but his mind was elsewhere. Eleanor's grief seemed genuine, but her engagement to Victor, a man of ambition, raised questions. Was Victor's devotion as pure as it seemed? And what of Charles, with his debts and sullen demeanor? Or Mrs. Wentworth, whose tears rang hollow? The night deepened, and Hastings retired to his room, a modest chamber overlooking the manor's gardens. He sat at the desk, sketching a rough timeline. 9:30 p.m. Sir Reginald leaves dining room for study. 10 p.m. Charles hears him humming. 10:17 p.m. Scream. Body discovered. He added notes on the suspect's alibis. None airtight. The cigarette case nagged at him. Charles smoked, but so did others. The lipstick smudge suggested a woman, but it could be a plant. And the brandy glass, why untouched? Had Sir Reginald been interrupted before he could drink? Sleep eluded him. He paced, replaying the evening. Sir Reginald's announcement loomed large. Had he planned to change his will, disinherit someone? Or was the motive simpler? Jealousy, revenge, or greed? The manor's closed circle meant no outsider could have slipped in unnoticed. The killer was here, hiding behind a mask of civility. As dawn crept over the hills, a car rumbled up the drive. Hastings peered out to see a familiar figure step out, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his mustache immaculate. Hercule Poirot had arrived. Hastings hurried downstairs, meeting Poirot in the hall. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes twinkling despite the grim occasion. "You have stumbled into a most intriguing puzzle. Tell me everything and omit nothing." Hastings recounted the evening, from the dinner to the murder, the alibis, and the clues. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his fingers steepled. When Hastings finished, Poirot nodded. "The little grey cells, they are already at work. This letter opener, this cigarette case, this brandy glass, they speak, Hastings, if one knows how to listen. Now, let us meet these players in our little drama." As they entered the drawing room, the guests turned, their faces a mix of relief and apprehension. Poirot's presence, so small yet so commanding, shifted the room's atmosphere. He bowed slightly, his voice smooth as velvet. "Mesdames et messieurs, I am Hercule Poirot. A tragedy has struck Blackthorn Manor, but rest assured, the truth cannot hide from me. I shall ask questions, and I shall observe, and in time, the guilty will be revealed. Hastings watched the suspect's reactions. Eleanor's hopeful glance, Victor's guarded frown, Charles's scowl, Lady Margaret's stiff nod, Mrs. Wentworth's flutter, Grayson's twitch, Beatrice's raised brow, Dr. Marwood's steady gaze. The game had begun, and Poirot, with his meticulous mind, was its master. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning sun cast long shadows across Blackthorn Manor's parquet floors, but the warmth of its eyes darting toward the door where Hercule Poirot now stood, his small, fastidious figure a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing just behind Poirot, felt a familiar surge of confidence at his friend's arrival. Poirot's impeccable black suit, his polished shoes, and the precise curl of his moustache spoke of a man in complete control, unruffled by the grim circumstances. His green eyes, sharp and inquisitive, swept the room, taking in every detail, the tense postures, the avoided glances, the faint tremor in Mrs. Wentworth's hand as she clutched her handkerchief. "Bon matin, mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said, his voice smooth and deliberate, carrying the faintest trace of his Belgian accent. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have been summoned to unravel the tragedy that has befallen this house. A man is dead, and the truth, it hides among you. But fear not, Hercule Poirot does not fail." A murmur rippled through the room. Eleanor Ashbourne, her eyes red from sleeplessness, looked up with a flicker of hope. Victor Langston, standing protectively beside her, frowned, his jaw tight. Lady Margaret Ashbourne, seated as rigidly as ever, gave a curt nod, while her son Charles slouched against the fireplace, lighting another cigarette with a shaking hand. Dr. Evelyn Marwood's calm gaze met Poirot's, unblinking, while Mrs. Clara Wentworth's sob broke the silence. Mr. Harold Grayson, the solicitor, adjusted his glasses nervously, and Miss Beatrice Langley tilted her head, her sharp eyes studying Poirot as if he were a puzzle to be solved. Inspector Warren, who had spent the night in the manor, cleared his throat. "Mr. Poirot, I've taken statements and secured the study. The coroner's on his way, but I'd appreciate your, assistance." His tone suggested he found Poirot's presence more of a formality than a necessity. Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Inspector. I shall begin by examining the scene of the crime, and then I shall speak with each of you. The little grey cells, they require facts, and facts I shall have." He gestured for Hastings to follow, and together they entered the study, where Sir Reginald's body had been removed, leaving only the grim tableau of his final moments. The desk, still stained with blood, held the silver cigarette case, now closed, and the untouched brandy glass. The letter opener, taken as evidence, had left a faint indentation in the blotting paper. Poirot's eyes roamed the room, lingering on the locked windows, the heavy oak door, and the clock, now stopped at 10:17 p.m., as if frozen at the moment of death. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low. "This room, it is a stage, and the props, they tell a story. The cigarette case, open when the body was found, oui?
Always had a glass after a meal. Odd that he didn't touch it." "Précisément," Poirot murmured, bending to examine the cigarette case. He opened it, revealing a faint smudge of red on the inner lid. Lipstick, as Hastings had suspected. "This smudge, it is deliberate, I think. A clue or a distraction. We shall see." He moved to the desk, noting a half-written letter, its ink smudged but legible. It began, "My dear Eleanor, I have decided to amend," but trailed off. Poirot's brow furrowed. "An amendment, perhaps to a will. This is significant, Hastings. Sir Reginald's announcement last night, it was no idle boast." Leaving the study, Poirot requested to see the manor's layout. The butler, Mr. Reynolds, provided a map showing the dining room, drawing room, library, and study, all connected by a central corridor. The study's single entrance faced the corridor with no other access. Poirot studied the map, his lips pursed. A closed circle, Hastings. The killer, he or she, is among us, and the answer lies in their movements. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot began his interviews, his manner polite but relentless. He started with Eleanor, who sat with her hands clasped tightly. "Mademoiselle Ashbourne, your uncle spoke of securing the manor's future. What did he mean?" Eleanor hesitated, her voice soft. "He didn't say exactly. He was always vague about money, but he mentioned protecting the estate for me. I thought it was about my dowry." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And your fiancé, Monsieur Langston? He was aware of this?" Victor, standing nearby, answered for her. "Sir Reginald was generous, but he kept his plans close. He told me only that the manor would remain in the family." Poirot nodded, turning to Lady Margaret. "Madame, you are Sir Reginald's sister-in-law. Did he confide in you about his intentions?" Lady Margaret's voice was cold. "Reginald was a fool with his money. He spoke of grand gestures, but I knew nothing of specifics. I only wished he'd been more prudent." Charles, overhearing, snorted. "Prudent? He was going to cut me out, wasn't he? All because of a few debts." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You believe he intended to disinherit you, Monsieur Ashbourne?" Charles flushed, lighting another cigarette. "He threatened it often enough. Said I was a disgrace." Poirot moved on to Dr. Marwood, who met his questions with calm precision. "I was in the library, reading, from 9:30 until the scream. I saw no one." "And yet," Poirot said, "you were quick to reach the study, with your medical bag already in hand. Most prepared, no?" Dr. Marwood's lips twitched. "I'm a doctor, Mr. Poirot." Prepared. Grayson fidgeted, saying little beyond his card game alibi. As the interviews concluded, Poirot gathered the group. "Mes amis, a pattern emerges, but it is incomplete. Each of you has a story, but stories, they can lie. I ask you to remain in the manor and to speak of nothing you have seen or heard. The truth, it will not hide for long." Hastings watched the suspects disperse, noting their reactions. Eleanor clung to Victor, her trust in him unshaken. Charles stormed off, his cigarette case glinting. Lady Margaret retreated with icy dignity, while Dr. Marwood's calm seemed almost too perfect. Mrs. Wentworth's tears had dried suspiciously fast, and Grayson's nervous tapping had intensified. Beatrice alone lingered, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a flicker of amusement, as if she relished the challenge. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "do you suspect someone already?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Suspect, Hastings? I suspect everyone. But the little grey cells, they are busy. The cigarette case, the brandy, the letter, they are pieces of a mosaic. We must find how they fit." As they retired to the library to review notes, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The manor, with its locked rooms and hidden motives, was a labyrinth, and only Poirot's methodical mind could navigate it. The days stretched ahead, promising revelations, but for now the shadow of death hung heavy, and the truth remained just out of reach. Chapter 4. The Questions Begin. The afternoon sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor's library, casting a golden glow over the leather-bound volumes and the polished oak table where Hercule Poirot sat, his notebook open before him. The room, with its high ceilings and musty scent of old books, seemed a fitting stage for the detective's meticulous process. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, watching the guests move about the manor's grounds, their figures small and distant, yet each carrying the weight of suspicion.
Poirot's arrival had stirred the household, and now, as he began his interrogations in earnest, the air crackled with unspoken tension. Poirot's method was as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. He had requested private interviews with each suspect to be conducted in the library away from the prying ears of the drawing room. Inspector Warren, though initially skeptical of Poirot's involvement, had grudgingly agreed, content to oversee the police's examination of the study while Poirot probed the human heart. Hastings, ever the loyal observer, remained at Poirot's side, jotting down notes and marveling at his friend's ability to see beyond the surface of words. The first to enter was Eleanor Ashbourne, her emerald gown replaced by a somber grey dress, her auburn hair pinned tightly. She sat across from Poirot, her hand—
Reginald was everything to me. I can't believe anyone here would do this. Poirot's eyes, sharp yet kind, studied her. Mademoiselle, your grief, it is genuine, I see. But let us speak of facts. Last night, your uncle spoke of securing the manor's future. You said it concerned your dowry, oui? Tell me, what else did he say of his plans? Eleanor hesitated, her fingers tightening. He was vague, as always. He mentioned the estate, said it would stay in the family. I assumed he meant for Victor and me, but he didn't elaborate. He seemed excited, though, almost secretive. Secretive, Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. And your fiancé, Monsieur Langston, he was close to Sir Reginald? They got on well, Eleanor said quickly. Victor respected him. They talked business often, investments, that sort of thing. Poirot nodded, making a note. And last night, between 9:30 and 10:17, you were with Monsieur Langston in the drawing room? Yes, the whole time. We were planning the wedding. Her voice faltered. Until the scream. Poirot leaned forward slightly. And did you see anyone else leave the drawing room during that time? Eleanor frowned, thinking. Beatrice was in and out. She said she needed air. And Charles, he left for a bit, said he was fetching a cigarette. I didn't watch the clock, though. Merci, mademoiselle. Poirot's smile was encouraging, but his eyes were already elsewhere, piecing together her words. As Eleanor left, Hastings whispered, She seems truthful, Poirot. Perhaps, Poirot murmured, but truth, Hastings, it wears many masks. Next came Victor Langston, his tailored suit as impeccable as ever, though his sharp features were taut with strain. He sat with the confidence of a man accustomed to control, but his fingers drummed lightly on the armrest. Mr. Poirot, he said, I'll be frank. Sir Reginald was a good man, but his death doesn't surprise me. He had enemies, business rivals, creditors. He wasn't as wealthy as he seemed. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Enemies, monsieur? Yet the study's locked windows and single door suggest the killer was within these walls. Tell me, what was your business with Sir Reginald? Victor's jaw tightened. I advised him on investments. He was planning to sell some land to fund Eleanor's future. We discussed it last week. And last night, Poirot pressed. You were with Mademoiselle Ashbourne. You saw nothing unusual? Nothing, Victor said firmly. We were together until the scream. I didn't even notice Charles or Beatrice leaving. Poirot made a note, his pen scratching softly. To Charles, no? And yet he guards his own movements carefully. Lady Margaret Ashbourne entered next, her posture rigid, her eyes cold. Mr. Poirot, this is a waste of time. Reginald's death is a tragedy, but I've nothing to hide. Madame, Poirot said smoothly. No one hides nothing. You were in your room reading, you say. Did you hear anything? Footsteps, voices? Nothing, she snapped. I was alone, as I prefer. Reginald's foolishness brought this on himself.
He was too generous, too trusting. Trusting of whom? Poirot asked. Lady Margaret's lips thinned. Charles, for one. My son is reckless, but he's no murderer. And that Wentworth woman, she's always sniffing around for money. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the letter on the desk, madame? Did Sir Reginald speak of changing his will? She stiffened. He mentioned it once, weeks ago. Said he wanted to protect Eleanor. I told him it was nonsense. The estate should go to Charles. He's an Ashbourne. Charles himself was next, slouching into the chair with a scowl. His cigarette case glinted in his hand, identical to the one in the study. Look, I didn't kill him, he said before Poirot could speak. Yes, he was cross about my debts, but I wouldn't stab him over it. Poirot's voice was calm. Your cigarette case, monsieur. It was found open on the desk. How do you explain this? Charles flushed. I don't know. I lost mine yesterday, must have left it somewhere. Anyone could have picked it up. A convenient loss, Poirot said, his tone neutral. And at 10 o'clock you heard your father humming. You did not enter the study? No, Charles said, his eyes darting away. I just passed by. Dr. Evelyn Marwood followed, her calm demeanour unshaken. I was in the library, as I said, she told Poirot. I heard nothing until the scream. I grabbed my bag and ran to the study. Your bag, Poirot noted, was ready, as if you anticipated trouble. Why? Dr. Marwood smiled faintly. A doctor is always prepared, Mr. Poirot. Sir Reginald had a weak heart. I thought it might be a collapse, not murder. Mrs. Clara Wentworth's interview was tearful, her story unchanged. She'd been playing cards with Grayson until the scream. Grayson himself confirmed this, though his hesitation lingered, and Poirot noted it. Beatrice Langley, the last to be questioned, entered with a spark of defiance. I was restless, she said. I walked the corridor, yes, but I didn't go near the study. I saw Charles heading that way around 10, though. Poirot closed his notebook. Merci, mademoiselle. You are observant, a quality I admire. But observation, it can also deceive. As Beatrice left, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Hastings, what do we see? Alibis that overlap, yet none are certain. The cigarette case, it points to Charles, but too obviously, no? The lipstick smudge, they whisper of motive, but the motive, it is hidden. Hastings frowned. The letter suggests a will change. Could that be it? Someone didn't want to lose their inheritance. Perhaps, Poirot said, but the heart of this crime is not money alone. It is passion, betrayal, fear. We must look deeper, Hastings, into the souls of these people. As the interviews ended, Poirot requested to see the manor staff. Mr. Reynolds, the butler, confirmed that no one had entered or left the manor after dinner, and the maids reported nothing unusual, though one mentioned finding a crumpled cigarette in the corridor near the study. Poirot's eyes lit up at this, and he asked to keep it. The day waned, and the manor remained a prison of suspicion. Poirot, undeterred, continued his observations, his mind a machine of logic and intuition. Hastings watched, knowing that each question, each glance, brought them closer to the truth, though it lay buried beneath a web of lies. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The late afternoon light bathed Blackthorn Manor in a golden haze, but within its walls the atmosphere remained taut with suspicion. The library, where Hercule Poirot conducted his inquiries, had become a crucible of truth and deception. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, watching the suspects move through the manor's grounds like chess pieces on a board, each maneuver calculated, each glance laden with meaning. Poirot, seated at the oak table, his notebook filled with meticulous notes, seemed unperturbed by the mounting tension, his green eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. Inspector Warren had returned from the study, his face flushed with frustration. Mr. Poirot, he said, brandishing a notebook, we've got a lead. That cigarette case, it's Charles Ashbourne's, no question. His initials are engraved on it. And he admits to passing the study at 10. He's our man, I'd wager. Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Inspector, you are a man of action, but haste, it clouds the judgment. The cigarette case, it is too obvious, no? A killer who leaves such a clue is either careless or cunning. Charles, he is not careless. Warren bristled. He's got motive, debts, a row with his father. And that lipstick smudge? Could be a woman covering for him. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone neutral. But let us not leap to conclusions. The little grey cells, they demand more. Hastings, intrigued, leaned closer. You think it's a plant, Poirot? Someone placed the cigarette case to frame Charles. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Frame, distract, mislead. These are the tools of the guilty. We must look beyond the obvious, Hastings.
Lost that case yesterday, he snapped, slamming it onto the table. Someone took it, left it there to make me look guilty. Poirot examined the case, noting the initials C.A. and the lipstick smudge. This smudge, monsieur, it is red. Who among the ladies uses such a shade? Charles shrugged, his anger giving way to unease. Eleanor, maybe? Or Clara? I don't pay attention to that sort of thing. Poirot dismissed him and called for Mrs. Clara Wentworth, whose tearful demeanour had begun to wear thin. She sat, clutching her handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Madame, Poirot said, you were playing cards with Monsieur Grayson until the scream, oui? Yet Monsieur Grayson, he hesitates when confirming this. Why? Clara's cheeks flushed. I don't know. We were together, I swear. I didn't see the cigarette case, but I might have used it. I smoke sometimes when I'm anxious. And the lipstick? Poirot asked, holding up the case. She hesitated, then shook her head. Not mine. Mine's coral, not red. Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. Next came Beatrice Langley, her sharp wit undimmed by the morning's grim events. She leaned back in her chair, studying Poirot with amusement. You think the cigarette case is a trick, don't you, Mr. Poirot? Clever. I saw Charles with it earlier that day, but not after dinner. And red lipstick? Eleanor's the only one bold enough for that shade. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You are observant, mademoiselle, but observation, it can be a weapon. Did you see anyone near the study? Beatrice smirked. I told you, I was wandering. I saw Charles heading that way, but I didn't linger. Corridors get dull quickly. As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The cigarette case. It is a red herring, Hastings. It points to Charles, but too neatly. And this lipstick, it is a clue, or a lie. We must verify. Poirot requested the ladies' cosmetic bags, a task Inspector Warren found absurd, but complied with. Eleanor's bag revealed a tube of vibrant red lipstick matching the smudge. Clara's, as she claimed, held coral. Beatrice used a pale pink, and Lady Margaret, predictably, carried none. Dr. Marwood, ever practical, had only a chapstick. Poirot's brow furrowed. Eleanor, she is implicated, but is it too simple? The killer, he or she, plays a game. The day progressed, and Poirot shifted his focus to the manor's staff, hoping to uncover discrepancies. Mr. Reynolds, the butler, reiterated that no one had left or entered the manor after dinner. A maid, Sarah, nervously admitted, Study. Someone else, perhaps, used his case. Hastings frowned. But who? And why leave it there? To mislead, Poirot said. The killer wishes us to chase shadows. But Hercule Poirot, he does not chase. He waits, and the shadows come to him. As evening approached, Poirot requested to see the manor's financial records, suspecting Sir Reginald's announcement tied to money. Mr. Grayson, as the family solicitor, reluctantly provided a ledger revealing significant debts on the estate, offset by recent land sales. Sir Reginald was planning to sell more, Grayson admitted. He wanted to secure Eleanor's future, but it would have left Charles with little. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you, Monsieur Grayson, you handled these transactions? Grayson nodded, his fingers tapping nervously. Yes, but I only followed his instructions. Naturellement, Poirot said, but his tone suggested doubt. Dinner was a sombre affair, the guests barely touching their food. Eleanor sat silently, her eyes fixed on her plate, while Victor whispered reassurances. Charles smoked relentlessly, his gaze defiant. Lady Margaret's silence was icy, and Clara's tears had dried, replaced by a nervous fidgeting. Dr. Marwood ate methodically, her calm unshaken, while Beatrice's sharp remarks were subdued, her eyes watchful. Grayson's tapping had become a rhythm, grating on Hastings' nerves. After dinner, Poirot gathered the group in the drawing room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice commanding. "The clues, they multiply, but the truth, it remains elusive. The cigarette case, the lipstick, the letter, they point to one among you. But which? I ask you to reflect on your actions, your words. The guilty, they cannot hide forever." The room fell silent, each suspect avoiding the other's eyes. Hastings watched, noting Victor's protective grip on Eleanor's hand, Charles's scowl, Clara's sudden pallor. The cigarette case, so obviously Charles's, felt like a trap, and the lipstick smudge, tied to Eleanor, seemed too convenient. Poirot's words had stirred the pot, and Hastings sensed the killer's unease growing. As the guests dispersed, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. "The red herrings, Hastings. They are many, but they serve a purpose. The killer wishes to distract us, to point to Charles, to Eleanor. But the little grey cells, they see through the fog. Tomorrow we shall dig deeper, into motives, into secrets." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The cigarette case, the lipstick, the letter, the untouched brandy. They were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. As night fell over Black, the grandeur of the manor, with his ivy-clad walls and polished interiors, seemed to mock the grim reality of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. In the library, Hercule Poirot sat at the oak table, his notebook a map of clues and contradictions, his green eyes alight with the quiet intensity of a man unraveling a tapestry of deceit. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at his side, felt the weight of the mystery pressing harder, each suspect's guarded demeanor a thread in the intricate web Poirot sought to untangle. Poirot had spent the early hours reviewing his notes, his fingers tracing the timeline Hastings had sketched. Sir Reginald's retreat to the study at 9:30 p.m., Charles's claim of hearing him humming at 10, the scream at 10:17, and the discovery of the body. The cigarette case, with its lipstick smudge and Charles's initials, loomed large, as did the untouched brandy glass and the half-written letter to Eleanor. Yet it was a smaller detail, one almost overlooked, that now captured Poirot's attention. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low and precise. "The cigarette found in the corridor by the maid, Sarah. It is a clue of great significance. It was smoked, oui, but not crushed, as one might expect if discarded in haste. And its brand, it matches those in Charles's case. Yet Charles insists he did not smoke near the study. It is a contradiction."
Hastings frowned. You think someone else used his cigarette case to frame him? Précisément, Poirot replied, his moustache twitching. But it is not enough to point fingers. We must ask, why this cigarette? Why leave it where it would be found? To pursue this thread, Poirot requested the cigarette from Inspector Warren, who had stored it with the evidence. The inspector, still convinced of Charles's guilt, handed it over with a grunt. You're chasing shadows, Poirot. The case, the timing, it's all Charles. Poirot merely smiled, examining the cigarette under a magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. Shadows, Inspector, often reveal the shape of truth. Observe, the paper is creased, as if held tightly, and the ash, it is uneven. This was smoked by someone nervous, perhaps in a hurry. He set the cigarette aside and turned to the Manor's layout, provided by Mr. Reynolds, the butler. The corridor outside the study was a narrow passage connecting the drawing room, dining room, and library. The cigarette had been found near the study door, a spot visible from the drawing room's entrance. This placement, Poirot mused. It is deliberate. The killer recounted finding the cigarette. It was just there, sir, by the study door, around 10:15. I thought it odd, but I swept it up. Didn't think to tell anyone till you asked. Poirot's eyes softened. You did well, mademoiselle. Tell me, did you see anyone in the corridor at that time? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Miss Langley, sir. She was walking back to the drawing room, just before I found it. And Mr. Grayson, he passed by earlier, looking flustered. Poirot thanked her, his mind already turning. He next called Beatrice Langley, whose sharp wit and observant nature made her a figure of interest. She entered with a confident stride, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a spark of challenge. Mr. Poirot, still hunting for crumbs? I told you I was wandering the corridor. I saw nothing unusual. And yet, Poirot said, holding up the cigarette, this was found where you walked, mademoiselle. You smoke, no? Beatrice laughed, a brittle sound. Occasionally, but not Charles brand. Mine are Turkish, not those common things. Besides, I'd hardly drop one so carelessly. Poirot nodded, noting her quick deflection. And Monsieur Grayson, you saw him in the corridor? She shrugged. He was pacing, muttering to himself. Looked like he'd lost something, or someone. As Beatrice left, Poirot summoned Harold Grayson, whose nervous tapping had become a fixture in Hastings' observations. Grayson sat, his glasses slipping down his nose, his fingers drumming on the table. Mr. Poirot, I've told you everything. I was with Mrs. Wentworth, playing cards until the scream. And yet, Poirot said, the maid saw you in the corridor, near the study, before 10:15. Why? Grayson's tapping stopped abruptly. I needed air. The drawing room was stifling. I stepped out, walked a bit, then returned. To the corridor by the study? Poirot pressed. Grayson's eyes darted away. I didn't go in, I swear it. Poirot dismissed him, turning to Hastings. The corridor. It is the key, Hastings. The cigarette. It was placed there, perhaps by someone who knew it would be found. Beatrice, Grayson, they were both nearby. But why a cigarette? Why not another clue? The answer came later, when Poirot re-examined the study. He knelt by the desk, his magnifying glass hovering over the floor. There, in the shadow of the rug, he found a tiny speck of ash, missed by the police. Voila, he said, collecting it carefully. This ash, it matches the cigarette. Someone smoked here, in the study,
before or during the murder. Hastings' eyes widened. But Charles said he didn't smoke there.
To cross-reference the suspect's movements with the timeline. He drew a map of the corridor, marking where Sarah found the cigarette and where Beatrice and Grayson had been seen. The study door, he noted, was visible from the drawing room, but a small alcove nearby offered concealment. Someone could have waited there, Poirot said, watching, listening, before striking. Dinner that evening was a tense affair. The guests' appetites diminished by Poirot's relentless probing. Eleanor, pale and silent, barely touched her soup. Victor's protective demeanor seemed strained, his eyes flicking toward Charles, who smoked sullenly. Lady Margaret's icy reserve held firm, while Clara Wentworth's nervous chatter filled the silences. Dr. Marwood ate with her usual calm, but Hastings caught her watching Poirot, as if measuring him. Beatrice's wit had returned, but her barbs were cautious, and Grayson's tapping was now a staccato rhythm. After dinner, Poirot gathered the group in the drawing room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice commanding, "a detail has emerged, small but significant. A cigarette, smoked and discarded, tells a story. Someone was near the study, perhaps inside, at the moment of death. I ask you, who smokes Charles Brand? Who was in that corridor?" The room froze. Charles' hand tightened on his cigarette case, but he said nothing. Eleanor's eyes widened, and Victor's jaw clenched. Clara let out a small gasp, while Beatrice's lips curved slightly, as if amused. Grayson's tapping stopped, his face pale. Poirot continued, "The truth, it is close. But it requires one more step. I ask you to reflect on your actions, your secrets. The guilty, they cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." As the guests dispersed, Hastings whispered, "You're rattling them, Poirot. That cigarette, it's shaken someone." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The clue, it is small, but it is a crack in the facade. Tomorrow, we shall widen it." The manor settled into an uneasy night, the cigarette's ash a silent witness to killer's misstep. Poirot's mind, like a finely tuned machine, churned through the details, and Hastings knew the truth was drawing nearer, hidden in the shadows of a single smouldering clue. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The third day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a mist that clung to the Devonshire hills, shrouding the estate in a veil of secrecy that matched the tangled web of deceit within its walls. The library, now Hercule Poirot's command post, hummed with the quiet intensity of his investigation. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the fireplace, watching Poirot pore over his notes. The half-truths. Poirot's focus had sharpened on the cigarette ash, a detail that suggested someone had smoked in the study at the time of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. The ash, matching the cigarette found in the corridor, pointed to a deliberate act, either the killer's or a carefully planted distraction. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low. "The ash. It is a whisper from the crime. It tells us someone was there, perhaps watching, perhaps striking. But who?" Hastings frowned. "Charles is the obvious suspect, with his cigarette case and all. But you think it's too neat, don't you?" "Precisimo," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "The obvious, it is a trap. The killer, they wish us to chase Charles, but the little grey cells, they see deeper." To unravel the lies, Poirot decided to probe the suspect's motives, focusing on Sir Reginald's cryptic announcement about securing the manor's future. The half-written letter to Eleanor, hinting at a change in plans, suggested a financial motive, but Poirot suspected darker currents, jealousy, betrayal, or hidden grudges. He requested private interviews again, this time with a sharper edge, aiming to expose contradictions. The first to enter was Victor Langston, his polished demeanor fraying at the edges. His sharp features were taut, and his fingers fidgeted with his cufflinks. "Monsieur Langston," Poirot began, "you advised Sir Reginald on investments. Yet Monsieur Grayson, the solicitor, says the estate was in debt. Did Sir Reginald confide in you about his financial troubles?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "He mentioned debts, yes, but he was optimistic. He planned to sell land to fund Eleanor's dowry. I encouraged it. He trusted my judgment." "And this trust," Poirot said, "it extended to you personally. You stood to gain through Mademoiselle Eleanor, no?" Victor bristled. "I love Eleanor. My interest was in her happiness, not her uncle's money." Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. "And the cigarette case. You suggested it was Charles. Did you see it in his possession that evening?" Victor hesitated, then nodded. "He was fiddling with it at dinner, but I didn't see it after." As Victor left, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "He points to Charles, yet guards his own motives. A man of ambition, perhaps too much." Next came Lady Margaret Ashburn, her icy composure unshaken. She sat ramrod straight, her hands folded in her lap. "Madame," Poirot said, "you spoke of Sir Reginald's generosity as foolishness. Did you resent his plans for the estate?" Lady Margaret's lips thinned. "Reginald was reckless, throwing money at Eleanor's whims. The manor should have gone to Charles. He's the heir, not some finance
To shape up or lose everything. But my son is no murderer." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the cigarette in the corridor, did you see anyone smoking that night?" "I don't notice such things," she snapped. "Ask Charles. He's always puffing away." Charles himself was next, his sullen demeanor now tinged with defiance. He lit a cigarette as he sat, the silver case glinting in his hand. "Monsieur Ashbourne," Poirot said, "your mother confirms your father's threat to disinherit you. This gives you motive, no?" Charles exhaled a cloud of smoke. "He was always threatening. Didn't mean I'd kill him. I was in the drawing room, not the study." "But the cigarette case," Poirot said, "it was found there, with a smudge of lipstick and ash, in the study. You smoke this brand, oui?" Charles paled. "I told you, I lost the case. Someone took it, and I didn't smoke in the study." Poirot leaned forward. "Then who did, monsieur? Who had access to your cigarettes?" Charles shrugged, but his eyes darted away. "Anyone. I leave it lying around." The interviews continued, each revealing cracks in the suspect's stories. Dr. Evelyn Marwood, calm as ever, reiterated her library alibi, but Poirot noted her quick arrival at the study with her medical bag. "You suspected trouble, doctor?" he asked. "I'm always prepared," she said, her voice steady. "Sir Reginald's heart was weak. I thought it might be a medical emergency." Mrs. Clara Wentworth, tearful yet evasive, admitted to smoking occasionally, but denied using Charles's cigarettes. "I was with Mr. Grayson," she insisted, though her eyes avoided Poirot's. Grayson himself, increasingly nervous, confirmed their card game, but faltered when pressed about his corridor sighting. "I was restless," he mumbled. "I didn't see anything." Beatrice Langley, ever sharp, entered with a smirk. "You're getting close, aren't you, Mr. Poirot?" That cigarette's got everyone twitching. Poirot's moustache twitched. "You are perceptive, mademoiselle. Tell me, did you see Monsieur Grayson or anyone else near the study?" Beatrice tilted her head. "Grayson was pacing, like I said. And Clara, she slipped out for a moment, said she needed her shawl. Didn't think much of it then." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the lipstick smudge, red like Mademoiselle Eleanor's. You noticed it?" Beatrice laughed. "Eleanor's the only one bold enough for red. But anyone can buy lipstick, Mr. Poirot." As the interviews ended, a new piece of information surfaced. The butler, Mr. Reynolds, approached Poirot with a hesitant air. "Sir, I didn't mention before, but I found something odd in the wastebin this morning, in Mrs. Wentworth's room. A torn letter addressed to Sir Reginald." Poirot's eyes lit up. He examined the fragments, piecing together a note in Clara's handwriting,
Reginald, we must speak privately.
Cannot continue like this. The money. The rest was illegible, but the implication was clear. A secret, perhaps a demand. Hastings, Poirot said. This letter, it is a revelation. Mrs. Wentworth, she hides more than tears. A financial motive, perhaps, or something deeper? Hastings nodded. She's been nervous, and her alibi with Grayson isn't solid. Could she have slipped to the study? Possible, Poirot said, but the cigarette, the ash, they point to another hand. We must watch her closely. At dinner, the tension was palpable. Kara's chatter was forced, her eyes darting to Grayson, who avoided her gaze. Eleanor clung to Victor, her trust wavering. Charles smoked relentlessly, his defiance brittle. Lady Margaret's silence was a wall, while Dr. Marwood's calm felt almost unnatural. Beatrice's sharp remarks had softened, her eyes watchful. Poirot, observing from the head of the table, said little, but Hastings knew his mind was racing. The torn letter, the cigarette ash, the lipstick smudge, they were threads in a tapestry of lies, and Poirot was pulling them apart, one by one. As the meal ended, he stood, his voice cutting through the silence. Mesdames et messieurs, secrets have been revealed, but more remain. A letter, a cigarette, a motive. They point to the heart of this crime. I ask you, who among you hides the truth? The room froze, eyes darting, hands trembling. Hastings watched Clara pale, Grayson's tapping cease, Beatrice's smirk fade. The lies were surfacing, and with them, the killer's shadow grew clearer, though the truth remained just beyond reach. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The mist that had cloaked Blackthorn Manor since morning thickened as evening fell, wrapping the estate in a shroud that seemed to mirror the tangled emotions within. The library, Hercule Poirot's haven of logic, was now a crucible where secrets smouldered, ready to ignite. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the fireplace, the crackle of the flames a counterpoint to the heavy silence that followed Poirot's latest revelations. The torn letter from Mrs. Clara Wentworth, the cigarette ash in the study, the lipstick-smudged cigarette case, each clue had tightened the noose of suspicion, and the suspect's facades were beginning to crack. Poirot sat at the oak table, his notebook open, his green eyes scanning the room with the precision of a watchmaker. The day's interrogations had unearthed motives: Charles's debts, Clara's mysterious letter, Victor's ambition, Lady Margaret's resentment, but the truth remained elusive, hidden in the interplay of alibis and lies. Hastings sensed a shift, as if the manor itself were holding its breath, awaiting the moment when someone would break. Poirot's falters. To this end, he requested an informal gathering in the drawing-room after dinner, a setting less formal than the library, where the suspects might lower their guards. The drawing-room was dimly lit, the chandelier casting flickering shadows on the velvet drapes. The guests sat in a loose circle, their faces a gallery of unease. Eleanor Ashbourne, pale and fragile, clung to Victor Langston's arm, her eyes searching for reassurance. Victor's sharp features were taut, his gaze flickering towards the door. Lady Margaret Ashbourne sat rigid, her hands folded, her expression a mask of disdain. Charles paced near the fireplace, his cigarette case clutched tightly, the smoke curling around him like a shroud. Dr. Evelyn Marwood, ever composed, sat near the window, a medical bag at her feet, her eyes alert. Mrs. Clara Wentworth dabbed at her eyes, though her tears had grown scarce. Mr. Harold Grayson's nervous tapping had returned, his glasses slipping down his nose. Miss Beatrice Langley, her wit subdued, watched the room with a predator's patience. Poirot stood at the center, his small stature commanding the space. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth but edged with steel, "we stand at a crossroads.
A man is dead, and the truth, it lies among you. Tonight I speak not only of clues, but of the heart. Secrets have been revealed. A letter, a cigarette, a motive. But one of you holds the key. I ask you now, who will speak? The silence was suffocating. Then Clara Wentworth let out a choked sob, her handkerchief falling to the floor. "I can't bear it any more," she cried, her voice breaking. "Reginald, he knew about my debts. I wrote that letter to beg him for help, not to threaten him. I swear I didn't kill him." The room froze, eyes turning to Clara. Victor's grip on Eleanor's hand tightened, and Charles stopped pacing, his cigarette trembling. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame Wentworth, you admit to the letter. The money, it said. What money?" Clara's face crumpled. I borrowed from Reginald years ago, when my husband died. I couldn't repay it, and he was pressing me. I begged him to wait, but he said he couldn't, not with his plans for Eleanor." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And this conversation, it took place when?" "Last week," Clara whispered. "In private. I didn't tell anyone." Poirot turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over them. "Yet someone knew, no? The letter was torn, discarded. Who saw it? Who used it?" Grayson's tapping stopped abruptly, his face pale. I saw her writing something," he stammered. "In the drawing room before dinner. I didn't read it." Clara's eyes widened. "You were spying on me?" "I wasn't."
Most observant, yet you say little. Why were you in the corridor near the study, as the maid saw you, before the murder?" Grayson's glasses buster. "I told you. I needed air. I didn't go near the study." "Yet the cigarettes was found there," Poirot said, his tone sharp. "And ash in the study. You smoke, monsieur?" Grayson flushed. "No, I don't smoke. I was just restless." The room stirred, and Hastings caught Beatrice's sharp glance at Grayson, her lips curving slightly. "He's nervous," she said softly, almost to herself. "Always tapping, always pacing." Poirot's eyes flicked to her. "Mademoiselle Langley, you see much. Did you see Monsieur Grayson with a cigarette?" Beatrice hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but I saw him near the corridor. He looked guilty." Grayson's glasses slipped further. "I wasn't! I swear, Enough," Poirot interrupted, his voice calm but commanding. "The truth, it is like a house of cards. One push, and it falls. Madame Wentworth, your letter was a secret, yet someone knew. Monsieur Grayson, you saw her write it. And the cigarette case, it points to Charles, but the ash suggests another hand. Who among you plays this game?" Eleanor's voice broke the silence, trembling but clear. "Mr. Poirot, I need to say something." She stood, her hands shaking. Victor tried to pull her back, but she shook him off. "Uncle Reginald, he wasn't happy about my engagement. He said Victor wasn't right for me, that he was too ambitious. We argued about it the day before the party." The room gasped. Victor's face darkened. "Eleanor, why bring this up now?" "Because it's true," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "He said he'd change his will, make sure I was protected. I didn't want to believe he'd do it, but maybe someone else knew." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your courage, it is admirable. This argument, who else knew of it?" Eleanor shook her head. "I don't know. I told no one." Lady Margaret's voice was icy. "Reginald was a fool, but he wouldn't disinherit family. This is nonsense." Charles snorted.
lighting another cigarette. "He'd do anything for Eleanor. You know it, Mother." Poirot said Jazand, "Enough, mes amis. The air grows heavy with accusations but no proof. Let us retire for the evening and reflect. The truth, it cannot hide forever." As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with fear and suspicion, Hastings pulled Poirot aside.
Next crack.
The manor settled into a restless night, the emotional weight of Clara's and Eleanor's revelations hanging like smoke. Hastings watched Poirot, who sat in the library, his eyes distant, his mind a whirlwind of logic. The truth was close, but the killer's mask remained intact, and Hastings knew only Poirot could tear it away. Chapter 9. The Trap. The fourth day at Blackthorn Manor broke with a restless energy, as if the very stones of the estate sensed the nearing climax of Hercule Poirot's investigation. The mist had lifted, revealing a sky of pale grey, but within the manor, the atmosphere remained thick with suspicion and unspoken fears. The library, Poirot's bastion of logic, was now a stage for his most calculated move yet. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, watching the suspects move through the grounds, their faces drawn, their steps hesitant. The emotional revelations of the previous evening, Clara Wentworth's tearful confession about her debts, and Eleanor Ashbourne's admission of her argument with Sir Reginald, had cracked the facade of civility, and Poirot was ready to exploit those cracks. Poirot sat at the oak table, his notebook a mosaic of clues. The cigarette case with Charles's initials, the lipstick smudge implicating Eleanor, the untouched brandy glass, the half-written letter hinting at a will change, the cigarette ash in the study, and Clara's torn letter. Each clue pointed to a suspect, yet none formed a complete picture. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate, "the time has come to set a trap. The killer, they are clever, but even the cleverest stumble under pressure. Tonight we shall gather them all, and the little grey cells they will provoke the truth." Hastings frowned, intrigued. "A trap, Poirot? You mean to confront them?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "But not with accusations, nor with questions. We shall create a scene, and the guilty, they will betray themselves." Poirot's plan was to host a gathering in the drawing room, ostensibly to review the case's progress, but in truth to apply psychological pressure. He instructed Inspector Warren to ensure all suspects attended, and he requested specific items from the evidence: the cigarette case, the crumpled cigarette, and a photograph of the study's desk showing the letter opener and brandy glass. "These props," Poirot told Hastings, "they will speak louder than words." As evening approached, the drawer tightly. Mr. Harold Grayson, his nervous tapping relentless, and Miss Beatrice Langley, her sharp eyes scanning the room. Poirot stood at the center, his small stature commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth but edged with authority. "We gather tonight to approach the truth of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. The clues, they are many, but they converge on one among you. Let us review, and let the guilty feel the weight of their deception." He held up the cigarette case, its silver surface catching the light. This case, with Monsieur Charles' initials, was found on the desk open with a smudge of red lipstick. Mademoiselle Eleanor, your lipstick matches this smudge, oui? Eleanor's eyes widened, her voice trembling. I didn't touch it. I swear, Mr. Poirot, I wasn't in the study. Victor's hand tightened on her arm. She's telling the truth, Poirot. Why would she leave such a clue? Poirot's mustache twitched. Why, indeed. And yet the cigarette found in the corridor matches those in this case. Monsieur Charles, you insist you lost it, yet ash was found in the study. Did you smoke there? Charles' face reddened, his cigarette trembling. I told you I didn't. Someone took my case. Someone's framing me. Poirot turned to the group, his gaze piercing. Framing, you say? Then let us consider the letter. He produced the photograph of the desk, showing the half-written note, My dear Eleanor, I have decided to amend. This letter suggests a change in Sir Reginald's will. Who stood to lose? Lady Margaret's voice was cold. Reginald was reckless, but he wouldn't disinherit Charles. This is nonsense. Clara Wentworth let out a small sob. I told you, Mr. Poirot, my letter was about my debts, not the will. I didn't know about any changes. Poirot's eyes flicked to her. Yet your letter, madame, was torn and discarded. Someone feared its discovery. Who? Grayson's tapping stopped, his face pale. I saw her writing, but I didn't touch it. Beatrice Langley's lips curved slightly. Everyone's so quick to point fingers, Mr. Poirot. But what about the brandy? Sir Reginald never drank it. Odd, isn't it? Poirot nodded, seizing the opening. Mademoiselle Langley, you are perceptive. The brandy, untouched, suggests an interruption. Sir Reginald was writing, perhaps speaking, when the killer struck. The letter opener was not a weapon of opportunity. It was chosen with intent.
Grayson's glasses slipped further. Lady Margaret's reserve wavered, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing. Beatrice's smirk faded, her eyes narrowing. Poirot paced slowly, his voice rising. Let us imagine the scene. Sir Reginald at his desk, writing to Mademoiselle Eleanor. Someone enters, someone he knows, for the door is not forced. They speak, perhaps argue. A cigarette is smoked, ash falls. The letter opener is seized, and the blow is struck. The killer leaves the cigarette case, perhaps with a smudge of lipstick to mislead. But why the brandy? Why leave it untouched? He stopped, facing the group. I put it to you. One of you was in that study. One of you smoked that cigarette. One of you struck the blow. And now, one of you will betray themselves. The silence was deafening. Then Clara Wentworth stood, her face crumpling. I can't stand it, she cried. I was in the study, yes, but only to talk. I begged Reginald for more time to pay my debts. He was angry, said he'd had enough. I left him alive, I swear. The room gasped. Grayson's face went white, and Beatrice's eyes widened. Victor's grip on Eleanor tightened, and Charles swore under his breath. Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. You foolish woman, what were you thinking? Poirot's voice was calm but relentless. Madame Wentworth, you were in the study when? Clara sobbed. Just before 10. I left and he was fine. I didn't touch the letter opener. And the cigarette? Poirot pressed. I don't know, she stammered. I don't smoke Charles's brand. Poirot turned to the group. Someone else was there, after Madame Wentworth. Someone who smoked, who struck. Who? No one spoke, but the tension was palpable. Hastings watched, his heart pounding, as Poirot's trap closed. Clara's confession had shifted the dynamics, but the killer's identity remained hidden, their reaction masked in the chaos of accusation. As the gathering dispersed, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. The trap, it has worked, Hastings. Madame Wentworth has revealed a truth, but not the whole truth. The killer, they are nervous now, and nervous people make mistakes. Hastings nodded, his mind racing.
Clara's admission, it puts her in the study, but she didn't kill him. Who followed her? Poirot's eyes gleamed. That, mon ami, is the question. The cigarette, the ash, the lipstick, they point to a plan, a mind that weaves deception. Tomorrow we shall spring the final trap. The manor settled into a restless night, the suspect's nerves frayed, the truth teetering on the edge of revelation. Hastings knew Poirot was close, his little grey cells poised to unmask the killer in a final, dramatic flourish. The reveal. The fifth day at Blackthorn Manor carried an air of inevitability, as if the very walls anticipated the denouement of Hercule Poirot's investigation. The morning was crisp, the Devonshire hills
bathed in a pale light that did little to dispel the shadows within the estate. The drawing room, where Poirot had chosen to stage his final act, was arranged with precision. Chairs in a semicircle, the chandelier dimmed, the velvet drapes parted to let in the cold daylight. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the fireplace, his heart pounding with anticipation. Poirot's trap the previous evening had shaken the suspects, and Clara Wentworth's confession had cracked the case wide open. Now the truth was within reach, and Poirot's little grey cells were poised to unveil it. The suspects gathered, their faces a gallery of dread and defiance. Eleanor Ashbourne sat close to Victor Langston, her hands trembling, her eyes searching for reassurance. Victor's sharp features were taut, his gaze flickering between Poirot and the door. Lady Margaret Ashbourne, her icy composure fraying, sat rigid, her lips a thin line. Charles Ashbourne leaned against the wall, his cigarette case clutched tightly, a fresh cigarette smoldering between his fingers. Dr. Evelyn Marwood, calm as ever, sat with her medical bag at her feet, her eyes steady but watchful. Mrs. Clara Wentworth, her tears replaced by a nervous fidgeting, twisted her handkerchief. Mr. Harold Grayson's tapping had ceased, his glasses slipping down his nose, his face pale. Miss Beatrice Langley, her wit subdued, watched Poirot with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Poirot stood at the center, his small figure radiating authority. In his hand he held the silver cigarette case, its surface glinting in the light. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth but commanding, "we have reached the moment of truth. Sir Reginald Ashbourne was murdered, and the killer is among you. The clues, the cigarette case, the lipstick, the letter, the ash, the brandy, they have spoken, and now Hercule Poirot will reveal what they say." He paused, his green eyes sweeping the room, noting every flinch, every glance. "Let us reconstruct the night of the crime. Sir Reginald retires to his study at 9:30 after announcing a plan to secure the manor's future. He begins a letter to Mademoiselle Eleanor, hinting at a change in his will. At 10, Monsieur Charles hears him humming but does not enter. At 10:15, Madame Wentworth visits, begging for leniency on her debts. She leaves him alive, and at 10:17, a scream announces his death. Poirot held up the cigarette case. This case, with Monsieur Charles' initials, was found on the desk open with a smudge of red lipstick. "Mademoiselle Eleanor, your lipstick matches this smudge, oui?" Eleanor gasped, her voice trembling. "I didn't touch it, Mr. Poirot. I wasn't in the study." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And yet the lipstick suggests otherwise, but let us consider another clue. The cigarette found in the corridor, matching those in this case. And ash found in the study suggesting someone smoked there. Monsieur Charles, you insist you did not smoke in the study, and I believe you." Charles's eyes widened, his cigarette trembling. "Then who did?" Poirot turned to the group. "The cigarette. It was smoked by the killer, not to frame Monsieur Charles, but to mislead us all. The ash in the study. It was not from Charles's cigarette, but from another, smoked by someone who entered after Madame Wentworth." He produced the crumpled cigarette, holding it aloft. "This cigarette, found by the maid, was placed in the corridor deliberately to suggest a careless act. But the killer is not careless. They are meticulous, calculating, and they know the manor well."
Hastings watched, his pulse quickening, as Poirot's narrative tightened the noose. The suspects shifted, their faces betraying fear, guilt, or defiance. Poirot continued, his voice rising. "Let us consider motive. Sir Reginald planned to change his will, to secure Mademoiselle Eleanor's future, perhaps at the expense of others. Madame Wentworth, your debts made you desperate, but your confession clears you. You left him alive. Monsieur Charles, your debts and your father's threats gave you motive, but the cigarette case, it is too obvious. Mademoiselle Eleanor, your argument with your uncle suggests tension, but your grief, it is genuine." He turned to Victor Langston. "Monsieur Langston, you advised Sir Reginald on investments, and you stood to gain through Mademoiselle Eleanor. But Sir Reginald doubted your intentions, no? He argued with Mademoiselle Eleanor about your suitability." Victor's jaw clenched. "He was wrong. I love Eleanor, not her money." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps. But let us turn to another. Monsieur Grayson, you handled Sir Reginald's finances, and you were seen in the corridor, nervous, pacing. You saw Madame Wentworth's letter, oui? Did you know its contents?" Grayson's glasses slipped, his voice shaking. "I told you, I only saw her writing. I didn't read it." "And yet," Poirot said, "you are nervous, always tapping, always watching. Why?" Grayson's face paled, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Dr. Marwood. "Doctor, your calm is remarkable. You arrived at the study with your bag, as if expecting trouble. And the wound, so precise. Did you recognize its skill?" Dr. Marwood's lips twitched. "I'm a doctor, Mr. Poirot. I know anatomy, but I was in the library." Poirot nodded, then faced Beatrice Langley. "Knowing its precision. And they left the brandy untouched. Because Sir Reginald was interrupted before Gemini, before he could drink." The room was silent, the air electric. Poirot paused, then pointed at Grayson. "Monsieur Grayson, it was you." Grayson's glasses fell to the floor, his face ashen. "Me? That's absurd." Poirot's voice was relentless. "You were in the corridor, nervous, pacing. You knew of Madame Wentworth's debts, of Sir Reginald's plans. You stood to lose your influence, your fees, perhaps more. You took Charles's cigarette case, smoked a cigarette and left it with Eleanor's lipstick smudge. You entered the study, argued with Sir Reginald and struck him with the letter opener, a weapon you knew would kill instantly." Grayson stood trembling. "You have no proof. I was with Clara." Clara gasped, a handkerchief falling. "You left the card table, Harold. You said you needed air." The room erupted in murmurs. Victor's eyes narrowed, and Eleanor clung to him, horrified. Charles swore, his cigarette dropping. Lady Margaret's face was stone, but her hands shook. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "The ash in the study. It matches the cigarette in the corridor. You smoked it, Monsieur Grayson, in a moment of panic, and left it to mislead. But the lipstick, it was your mistake. Too obvious, too clever." Grayson collapsed into his chair, sobbing. I didn't mean to. He was going to ruin me. The new will, it cut me out. Everything I worked for." Inspector Warren stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Harold Grayson, you're under arrest." The room was a tableau of shock, relief, and horror. Eleanor wept, Victor holding her tightly. Charles stared, stunned. And Lady Margaret's composure broke, her face crumpling. Dr. Marwood's calm wavered, her eyes wide. Beatrice's lips parted, her wit silenced. Poirot bowed slightly. The truth, it is revealed. The little grey cells, they do not fail. As Grayson was led away, the manor exhaled. The weight of the crime lifted, but the scars remained. Poirot's trap had worked, and the killer's mask had fallen, exposed by the relentless logic of his mind. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning after Hercule Poirot's dramatic revelation in the drawing-room of Blackthorn Manor was one of quiet aftermath, as if the estate itself were recovering from the storm of truth that had swept through its walls. The Devonshire hills, bathed in a soft, pale light, seemed to mourn the loss of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, while the man stepped slow, but her face less haunted. Lady Margaret Ashbourne sat on a bench, her rigid posture softened, her eyes distant. Charles Ashbourne leaned against a tree, smoking, his cigarette case glinting in the sunlight, no longer a symbol of accusation. Dr. Evelyn Marwood, a medical bag slung over her shoulder, spoke quietly with a maid, her calm restored. Mrs. Clara Wentworth, her tears genuine now, sat alone, her handkerchief crumpled. Miss Beatrice Langley, her wit returning, chatted with a gardener, her laughter, a faint echo of the manor's former gaiety. Hercule Poirot, impeccable as ever in his black suit and polished shoes, sat at the oak table, his notebook closed, his green eyes reflective. The cigarette case, the lipstick smudge, the torn letter, the cigarette ash, the untouched brandy glass, these clues, once scattered, had formed a mosaic of guilt, and Poirot had pieced them together with the precision of a master. Hastings, ever in awe of his friend's genius, joined him at the table, a cup of tea in hand. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "you did it again. Grayson, I never would have guessed. He seems so unremarkable." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, it is the unremarkable who often hide the deepest motives. Monsieur Grayson, he was a man of quiet ambition, a solicitor who saw his influence slipping. The new will, it threatened his control, his fees, his place in Sir Reginald's world. He acted not from passion, but from cold calculation." Hastings nodded, sipping his tea. The cigarette case, the lipstick, it was all so clever. "He pointed us to Charles and Eleanor, didn't he?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his fingers steepled. The cigarette case, with Charles's initials, was a stroke of misdirection. The lipstick smudge, taken from Mademoiselle Eleanor's cosmetic bag, was meant to cast suspicion on her. And the cigarette, smoked and left in the corridor, was a subtle touch, suggesting a careless act. But Grayson, he underestimated Hercule Poirot. The ash in the study, it was his mistake. A trace of his presence he could not erase. Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "And Clara's letter? How did you know it wasn't her?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame Wentworth's letter. It was genuine in its desperation. She admitted to begging Sir Reginald, and her tears, they were those of fear, not guilt. The killer, they used her letter to deepen the confusion. But Grayson's nervousness, his tapping, his pacing betrayed him. The little grey cells, they see what the heart conceals."
Confession. It was the final act. The library door opened, and Eleanor Ashbourne entered, her grey dress a somber contrast to her emerald gown from the first night. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, I wanted to thank you. Uncle Reginald's death, it's unbearable, but knowing the truth, it helps. Poirot rose, bowing slightly. Mademoiselle, it is my duty to find the truth, no matter how painful. Your uncle, he wished to protect you, and in his memory, you must live with courage. Eleanor's lips trembled. He didn't trust Victor, but I do. We'll rebuild, somehow. Poirot's gaze softened. The heart, it is resilient. You will find your way. As Eleanor left, Hastings turned to Poirot. What about the others? Charles, Lady Margaret, Clara, they all had secrets. Poirot nodded. Each had a motive, Hastings, but not the means or the moment. Monsieur Charles, his debts made him a suspect, but his anger was too open, too raw. Madame Wentworth, her desperation was real, but she lacked the nerve for murder. Lady Margaret, her resentment was cold, but her loyalty to Charles kept her from such a deed. A doctor, Mademoiselle Langley, they observed, they knew, but they did not strike. Hastings frowned. And Beatrice? She seemed to enjoy the chaos. Poirot's smile was wry. Mademoiselle Langley, she is a watcher, a collector of secrets. Her wit, it is her shield. But she had no stake in Sir Reginald's death. No, it was Grayson, the quiet one, who wove the web. The conversation paused as Inspector Warren entered, his bristling mustache less formidable now. Mr. Poirot, he said, his tone grudgingly respectful, you've done it. Grayson's confessed fully, said he panicked when Sir Reginald threatened to cut him out of the will. He's being taken to Exeter for trial. Poirot inclined his head. Merci, Inspector. The law, it will take its course. Warren hesitated, then added, You've got a knack, I'll give you that. Never seen a case cracked like this. As Warren left, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression philosophical. The human heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth. Greed, fear, love. They drive us to acts we cannot imagine. Sir Reginald, he was a man of generosity, but also of secrets. His death, it was a tragedy of trust betrayed. Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the case. You always say it's the little things, Poirot. The ash, the lipstick, the brandy. They tell the story. Oui, Poirot said, rising. The little grey cells, they listen to the whispers of the clues. And now, windows, their faces a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Eleanor waved faintly, and Charles nodded, a rare gesture of respect. Outside, a car waited to take them to the station. Hastings glanced back at the manor, its ivy-clad walls serene in the morning light. Another case solved, Poirot, he said. You never cease to amaze me. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The world, it is full of puzzles, Hastings, and as long as there are puzzles, Hercule Poirot will be there to solve them. As the car pulled away, the manor receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its tragedy resolved. Poirot leaned back, his mind already turning to the next challenge, while Hastings marveled at the genius of his friend, whose little grey cells had once again triumphed over the darkness of deceit. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The sixth day at Blackthorn Manor unfolded under a sky of unbroken grey, as if the heavens themselves were reluctant to cast light on the aftermath of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. The manor, with its ivy-clad walls and sombre grandeur, seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, yet an undercurrent of unease lingered among its inhabitants. The revelation of Harold Grayson's guilt had lifted the veil of suspicion, but the wounds of betrayal and loss remained raw. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the manor's terrace, watched the mist drift over the Devonshire hills, his mind still reeling from Hercule Poirot's masterful unmasking of the killer.
The case was solved, but the echoes of truth reverberated, stirring questions of motive and morality. Inside, Poirot sat in the drawing room, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the worn elegance of the furnishings. His notebook, now closed, rested on the table beside a cup of tisane, its steam curling in the cool air. Hastings joined him, noting the detective's reflective demeanor. Poirot's green eyes, usually so sharp, held a quiet contemplation, as if the case's resolution had left him pondering the deeper currents of human nature. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice soft but precise. "The truth, it is a double-edged sword. It frees the innocent, but it also wounds those who trusted the guilty. Monsieur Grayson, he was a shadow in this house, unnoticed until he struck. Yet his actions, they ripple through the lives of all here." Hastings nodded, settling into a chair. "It's hard to believe, Poirot. Grayson seemed so ordinary." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile forming. "The ordinary, mon ami, they are often the most dangerous. Grayson's nervousness, it was not mere habit, it was fear, the fear of discovery. The cigarette ash in the study, it was his fatal error. He smoked to steady his nerves, sipping his tisane. The smudge, it was too perfect, too deliberate. Mademoiselle Eleanor's lipstick, it was easily accessible. Her cosmetic bag was left in the drawing room. Grayson, he used it to cast suspicion, to weave a narrative of jealousy or betrayal. But the little grey cells, they saw through the deception." The drawing-room door opened, and Eleanor Ashbourne entered, her grey dress sombre but her posture steadier than the day before. Her auburn hair was neatly pinned, and her eyes, though tired, held a spark of resolve. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice soft. "I wanted to speak with you before you leave. The manor, it feels different now, but I'm not sure if it's peace or just emptiness." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Mademoiselle, the manor, it will heal, as will you. The truth, it is painful, but it allows you to move forward. Your uncle, he wished for your happiness, and you must honor that." Eleanor's lips trembled. "I keep thinking about his letter, the one he didn't finish. He was going to protect me, wasn't he? From Victor, from everything." Poirot's gaze softened. "Oui, mademoiselle. Sir Reginald, he saw in you the future of Blackthorn Manor. His intentions, they were noble, though they stirred the greed of another." As Eleanor left, Victor Langston appeared in the doorway, his sharp features softened by concern. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice low, "Eleanor's been through too much. I need to know, will there be more trouble? Grayson's confession, is it solid?" Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Monsieur Langston, the confession, it is complete. Monsieur Grayson acted alone, driven by the fear of losing his influence. But you must prove yourself worthy of Mademoiselle Eleanor's trust. Sir Reginald, he doubted you, and perhaps he was not entirely wrong." Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll do right by her. You have my word." As Victor departed, Hastings raised an eyebrow. "You're hard on him, Poirot. Do you still suspect him?" Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. Monsieur Langston, he is ambitious, but his love for Mademoiselle Eleanor, it is genuine. His fault was only in his silence. He knew of Sir Reginald's doubts, but did not speak." The morning progressed, and the other inhabitants of the manor sought Poirot out, each grappling with the aftermath.
Lady done for. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Monsieur Charles, the case. It was a clever distraction, but not clever enough. Your task now is to honor your father's memory, not his wealth. Mrs. Clara Wentworth, her tears now those of relief, thanked Poirot profusely. "I was so afraid you'd think it was me," she said, her voice trembling. "That letter. I only wanted help." Poirot patted her hand. "Madame, your heart, it is open, and that saved you. Be at peace." Dr. Evelyn Marwood and Beatrice Langley were the last to approach, each in their own way. Dr. Marwood's calm was unshaken, but she admitted to Poirot, "I should have seen Grayson's nerves for what they were. I'm trained to notice such things." "You noticed enough, Doctor," Poirot said. "Your presence, it steadied the others." Beatrice, her wit returning, offered a wry smile. "You're a marvel, Mr. Poirot. I thought I'd seen it all, but you see everything." Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle, the eyes of Hercule Poirot, they miss little. But your observations, they were most helpful." As the day waned, Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave. Inspector Warren, now fully convinced of Poirot's genius, shook his hand. "You've got a gift, Mr. Poirot. I'll be telling this story for years." Poirot smiled faintly. "The gift, Inspector, is only logic and observation. Use them, and you will find your own way." As they walked to the waiting car, Hastings glanced back at the manor. "It's strange, Poirot. The case is solved, but it doesn't feel finished. They're all so broken." Poirot nodded, adjusting his hat. "The truth, Hastings. It heals, but it also scars. Blackthorn Manor, it will carry this tragedy, but it will endure, as will they." The car pulled away, the manor receding into the mist. Hastings watched Poirot, whose mind seemed already to wander to new puzzles. The echoes of truth lingered, but for now, the little grey cells rested, their work complete, their triumph undeniable. Chapter 13. The Weight of Legacy. The seventh day at Blackthorn Manor unfolded under a sky that had finally cleared, the sun casting long golden rays across the Devonshire hills, as if offering a tentative promise of renewal. The manor itself, however, bore the weight of its recent tragedy, its ivy-clad walls standing as silent witnesses to the unravelling of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. The revelation of Harold Grayson's guilt had lifted the pall of suspicion, but the scars of betrayal lingered, etched into the hearts of those sharp, reflecting on the case that had consumed the manor for nearly a week. His notebook, now a chronicle of triumph, lay closed on the table, its pages filled with the meticulous logic that had unmasked a killer. Hastings joined him, settling into a chair, his mind still turning over the intricacies of Poirot's method. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "the manor feels different today. Lighter somehow, but there's still a heaviness. Do you think they'll ever recover?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his expression philosophical. "Mon ami, the human spirit, it is resilient, but it carries its burdens. Blackthorn Manor, it is more than stone and mortar. It is a legacy. The Ashbournes, they will rebuild, but they must first confront the weight of what has passed." Hastings nodded, his gaze drifting to the window. Grayson's confession. It was so sudden, so complete. I keep wondering what drove him to such desperation. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Monsieur Grayson,
He was a man of quiet greed, hidden behind a mask of ordinariness. The change in Sir Reginald's will, it threatened not only his income, but his sense of control. To lose his place in the Ashbourne legacy, it was unbearable, so he acted, with a precision that almost succeeded. But the little grey cells, they see what is hidden. The drawing-room door opened, and Charles Ashbourne entered, his usual sullen demeanour softened by a newfound resolve. His cigarette case, once a symbol of suspicion, was tucked into his pocket, and his eyes held a flicker of determination. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice steady. "I've been thinking. The manor, it's mine now, or it will be. I want to do right by it, by father, but I don't know where to start." Poirot's gaze was kind but piercing. "Monsieur Charles, the path forward. It begins with honesty. Your father, he wished for the manor to endure, not as a burden, but as a home. Your debts, your recklessness, they must be faced, not ignored." Charles nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. I've been a fool, but I'll try. For father, and for Eleanor." As Charles left, Lady Margaret Ashbourne appeared, her icy reserve tempered by a quiet sorrow. She sat across from Poirot, her hands folded. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice low, "you've given us clarity, but at a cost. The manor feels hollow now. Charles will inherit, but I wonder if it's a gift or a curse." Poirot's tone was gentle. "Madam, a legacy is what one makes of it. Your son, he has a chance to rebuild, to honor Sir Reginald's vision. You, as his mother, must guide him, not control him."
Rested lightly on her arm, his sharp features softened by devotion. "Mr. Poirot," Eleanor said, "we've decided to stay at the manor, at least for now. Victor and I, we want to make it our home, to keep Uncle Reginald's memory alive." Poirot smiled faintly. "Mademoiselle, your uncle, he saw in you the heart of this place. Monsieur Langston, you must prove worthy of that trust. The manor, it is a responsibility, not a prize." Victor nodded, his gaze steady. "I understand, Mr. Poirot. I'll do everything I can for Eleanor and the manor." As they left, Hastings turned to Poirot. "They're trying to move on, but it's not easy. Clara, Beatrice, Dr. Marwood, they're all still shaken." Poirot nodded. "Madame Wentworth, her debts drove her to desperation, but not to murder. Mademoiselle Langlais, her wit concealed a keen observer, but not a killer. The doctor, her calm was her strength, but it hid no guilt. They too will find their way." Mrs. Clara Wentworth appeared briefly, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Poirot, I've written to my creditors," she said. "I'll sell what I have to pay them. I want to start fresh, without secrets." Poirot's eyes softened. "Madame, your courage, it is admirable. The truth, it has set you free." Dr. Evelyn Marwood and Beatrice Langley approached together, an unlikely pair united by the ordeal. Dr. Marwood spoke first, her voice calm. "Mr. Poirot, I've decided to stay in the village. The manor needs a doctor, and I feel I owe it to Sir Reginald." Beatrice's smile was wry. "And I'm off to London, Mr. Poirot. This place has too many ghosts for me. But I'll never forget your little grey cells at work." Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle, your observations, they were most valuable. Doctor, your presence, it will heal this place." As the day drew to a close, Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart. The manor's staff, led by Mr. Reynolds, the butler, gathered to bid them farewell. Reynolds, his stoic demeanour softened, shook Poirot's hand. You've done us a great service, sir. The manor can breathe again. Poirot inclined his head. Merci, Monsieur Reynolds. The truth, it is the greatest service. Outside, the car waited, its engine humming softly. Hastings glanced back at the manor, its windows glinting in the fading light. It's strange, Poirot, he said. The case is over. But the manor, it's like it's still holding on to something. Poirot adjusted his hat. Chapter 14. The Path Forward. The 8th day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a tentative brightness, the sun breaking through the clouds to bathe the Devonshire hills in a golden glow. The manor, its ivy-clad walls standing resolute against the passage of time, seemed to exhale the last vestiges of its recent tragedy. The unmasking of Harold Grayson as Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murderer had lifted the suffocating veil of suspicion, but the inhabitants of the manor were still navigating the delicate balance between mourning and renewal. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the grand hall, his suitcase packed, watching the soft light filter through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished floor. The weight of the case lingered in his mind, its resolution both a triumph and a reminder of human frailty. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his black suit and polished shoes, stood beside him, his hat in hand, his green eyes reflective but serene. His notebook, the chronicle of the case's clues, the cigarette case, the lipstick smudge, the torn letter, the cigarette ash, and the untouched brandy glass remained tucked away, its purpose fulfilled. The little grey cells, so relentless in their pursuit of truth, now rested, though Poirot's mind was never truly idle. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, felt a quiet awe at his friend's ability to transform chaos into clarity. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice soft. "It's strange to leave this place. The manor feels alive, almost, as if it's ready to start again. But can they really move on after all this?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile forming. "Mon ami, the manor, it is like the human heart. It endures, it heals, but it carries its scars. The Ashbournes, they have been tested, but they have the strength to forge a new path. The truth, it is their foundation now." Hastings nodded, glancing toward the drawing room, where the remaining guests were gathered for a final farewell. Eleanor Ashbourne stood near the fireplace, her grey dress replaced by a soft blue one, a sign of her tentative step toward hope. Victor Langston, his sharp features softened by resolve, stood beside her, his hand gently on hers. Lady Margaret Ashbourne, her icy demeanour thawed by the ordeal, spoke quietly with Charles, who held his cigarette case but refrained from smoking, a rare restraint. Mrs. Clara Wentworth, her debts now openly acknowledged, sat with a newfound calm, her handkerchief folded neatly. Dr. Evelyn Marwood, her medical bag packed, prepared to return to her village practice, her steady presence a comfort to the household. Miss Beatrice Langley, her wit fully restored, lingered by the window, her eyes bright with plans for London.
"But you've given us a chance to heal. Victor and I were going to restore the manor, make it a place of joy again." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes kind. "Mademoiselle, your uncle, he wished for your happiness. The manor, it is yours to shape. You have the heart for it, and Monsieur Langston, he must prove his worth." Victor met Poirot's gaze, his jaw firm. "I will, Mr. Poirot, for Eleanor, and for Sir Reginald's memory." Lady Margaret joined them, a voice softer than Hastings had ever heard. "Mr. Poirot, you've done more than solve a crime. You've given Charles a chance to be better. I was wrong to shield him so fiercely." Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "Madame, a mother's love,
It is a powerful force, but it must guide, not blind. Your son, he has the chance to redeem the Ashbourne name." Charles, overhearing, stepped forward, his usual scowl replaced by a hesitant nod.
"I'm going to try, Mr. Poirot. The manor's mine now, and I won't let it fall to ruin. Father deserved better." Poirot's eyes gleamed.
"Monsieur Charles, the path forward, it is not easy, but it is yours to walk. Begin with honesty, and the rest will follow."
Mrs. Clara Wentworth approached, her face serene despite her ordeal.
"Mr. Poirot, I've written to my creditors, as I said. I'm selling my jewelry to settle the debts. It's a fresh start, thanks to you."
Poirot patted her hand.
"Madame, the truth, it has freed you. Walk forward with courage."
Dr. Marwood and Beatrice Langley were the last to offer farewells. Dr. Marwood's voice was calm but warm. "Mr. Poirot, I'll stay in the village, as I said. The manor needs healing, and I can help." Poirot smiled. "Doctor, your steadiness, it is a gift to this place. Use it well." Beatrice's wry smile returned, her eyes twinkling. "Mr. Poirot, you're a magician with those little grey cells. London's calling, but I'll carry this story with me. You've made it unforgettable." Poirot bowed, his moustache twitching with amusement. "Mademoiselle, your wit, it is a spark. Let it light your path." As the farewells concluded, Mr. Reynolds, the butler, approached, his stoic demeanour softened by gratitude. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, the manor owes you a debt. You've restored its heart." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Monsieur Reynolds. The manor, it will thrive under your care." Outside, the car waited, its engine a soft hum against the morning's quiet. Hastings took a final look at the manor, its windows reflecting the sun like eyes watching their departure. "It's over, Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with melancholy. "But it feels like the manor's story is just beginning." Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes distant. "The story, Hastings, it never truly ends. The manor..." Down the drive, the manor faded into the hills, its silhouette a testament to endurance. Hastings watched Poirot, whose mind seemed already to drift to new mysteries, his little grey cells ever ready for the next challenge. The path forward, for both the manor and its detective, was clear, illuminated by the unyielding light of truth. Chapter 15. The Final Farewell. The 9th day at Blackthorn Manor broke with a serene clarity. The Devonshire hills bathed in a soft morning light that seemed to cleanse the estate of its lingering shadows. The manor, with its ivy-clad walls and timeless grandeur, stood as a silent testament to the tragedy it had endured and the truth that had set it free. The unmasking of Harold Grayson as Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murderer had lifted the oppressive weight of suspicion, and now, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings prepared to depart, the manor seemed poised on the cusp of a new beginning. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and blooming roses, a quiet promise of renewal. Hastings stood in the grand hall, his suitcase at his feet, watching the sunlight stream through the stained glass windows, casting vibrant patterns on the polished floor. The manor felt different today, less a prison of secrets, more a home ready to heal. Poirot, impeccable in his black suit, his patent leather shoes gleaming, adjusted his hat with a precise hand, his green eyes reflective but calm. His notebook, the repository of the case's clues, the cigarette case, the lipstick smudge, the torn letter, the cigarette ash, and the untouched brandy glass remained tucked away, its work complete. The little grey cells, having triumphed over deception, were at rest, though Hastings knew Poirot's mind was ever alert for the next challenge. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with sentiment, "it's hard to leave this place. The manor's been through so much, yet it feels hopeful now. Do you think they'll truly move on?"
Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile forming. Mon ami, the manor, it is like a ship that has weathered a storm. It bears the marks of its trials, but it sails on. The Ashbournes, they have faced their truths, grief, betrayal, redemption, and now they must chart their course. The little grey cells, they have done their part. Hastings nodded, glancing towards the drawing room, where the remaining inhabitants had gathered for a final farewell. Eleanor Ashbourne stood near the fireplace, her blue dress a symbol of her tentative optimism, her auburn hair catching the light. Victor Langston, his sharp features softened by devotion, stood beside her, his hand gently on hers. Lady Margaret Ashbourne, her icy reserve bag-packed, prepared to return to her village practice. Her steady presence a balm to the household. Miss Beatrice Langley, her wit fully restored, lingered by the window, her eyes bright with anticipation for her London adventures. Eleanor approached Poirot and Hastings, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Mr. Poirot? Captain Hastings?" she said, her voice steady. "You've given us more than justice. You've given us a chance to start again. The manor, it's home now. Not just a legacy. Victor and I, we'll make it a place of love, as Uncle Reginald wanted." Poirot bowed, his eyes kind. "Mademoiselle, your uncle, he saw in you the heart of Blackthorn Manor. You and Monsieur Langston, you must nurture that heart. The truth, it has cleared the way." Victor stepped forward, his gaze earnest. "Mr. Poirot, I know Sir Reginald doubted me, but I'll prove him wrong. For Eleanor, for the manor, I'll do right." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur, the proof is in the doing. You have the chance. Seize it." Lady Margaret approached, her posture less rigid, her voice softer than Hastings had ever heard. "Mr. Poirot, you've given Charles a future he nearly lost. I was blind to his faults, but now I'll help him be the man his father hoped for." Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "Madame, a mother's guidance. It is a beacon. Your son, he has the strength to rise. If you light the way." Charles joined them, his usual sullenness replaced by a quiet determination. "Mr. Poirot, I've been a fool, but I'm done running. The manor's mine to care for, and I won't let it, or father, down." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching with approval. "Monsieur Charles, the path of redemption. It is steep, but you have begun the climb. Continue, and you will honor your father's name." Mrs. Clara Wentworth approached, her face radiant, with a newfound peace. "Mr. Poirot, I've settled my debts, or I will, soon. The truth about my letter, it freed me. I can live honestly now." Poirot patted her hand. "Madame, honesty, it is the greatest wealth. You have found it." Dr. Marwood and Beatrice Langley were the last to offer farewells. Dr. Marwood's voice was calm but warm. "Mr. Poirot, the village needs me, and I know—" As the farewells concluded, Poirot and Hastings stepped into the grand hall, where the stained glass windows cast their final patterns. The car waited outside, its engine a soft hum against the morning's calm. Hastings took one last look at the manor, its windows glinting like eyes bidding them farewell. "It's over, Poirot," he said, his voice soft. "The manor's ready for a new chapter, but I'll miss it somehow.
Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes distant but serene. "The manor, Hastings. It is a living thing, shaped by those who dwell within. Its story continues, as do ours. The truth, it has set them free. And now we move on to new puzzles." The car rolled down the drive, the manor receding into the hills, its silhouette a symbol of endurance and renewal. Hastings watched Poirot, whose mind seemed to linger on the case, his little gray cells already anticipating the next challenge. The final farewell was complete, and Blackthorn Manor, with its scars and its hopes, stood ready to face its future, illuminated by the unyielding light of truth.